Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you have ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. I am your host, Patty Porter. My guest hosts, Dina Zametta and Stephen Kotev, along with our guest experts, will share our experiences, raise your awareness, and give you food for thought. We will share with you problem-solving strategies no matter what your situation is. At work, with neighbors or friends, family, and as partners. Tune in or join in the conversation every Tuesday evening.
As our children grow, they naturally push for more control over their own lives. Growing independence and natural curiosity may bring them to question why the family believes what we believe. They might even reach the point of changing or abandoning beliefs held dear. How do we, as parents, keep emotions in check and constructively engage our kids in a conversation about our beliefs? How might we turn a potential minefield into blessings in disguise? Hello, I'm your guest host, Stephen Kotev, and joining us today for our program entitled Talking to Your Tweens and Teens When They Question Their Beliefs is Janet Bonnin. Janet is a trained and accredited life coach, lifelong Christian, dedicated wife and mother of 3 great kids. Her Families of the Way ministry program provides parents opportunities to foster spiritual growth in their children, learn to parent more effectively, and strengthen family teamwork and unity. Janet has been working with busy parents since 2000, trained as a life coach at the Coaches Training Institute and certified by the International Coaching Federation. She has turned her passion for helping busy people into a career coaching moms and dads. Combining training as a life coach with a degree as a systems process engineer, Janet takes a very practical approach to helping busy parents by improving personal effectiveness, identifying goals and action plans. She motivates and encourages parents to easily take the steps needed to improve their lives and raise strong, efficient, self-sufficient children. Welcome to the program, Janet.
Thanks, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be back.
So this is your 3rd time back on the program. What keeps you coming back?
Well, I love this program, the Texas Conflict Coach Show. I love listening to other guest experts, and I love being an expert on the show. You know, my passion is helping parents address conflict and other issues in their families, and I just find it wonderful to be able to explore ideas that are in my heart and mind with you, Stephen.
Well, thank you, and I think it's not just me; it's our listeners more than anybody. You know, I get to play the voice maybe of the listeners, but they can't say it. But we're very thankful to have you join us again and talk to me about why focus on teens and tweens. You know, is that the most common age for children to question their beliefs?
It is a very common age and stage for children to develop this. You know, when our kids are younger, they just more naturally will follow our lead as parents. As they grow, we should gradually step back and give them room to take on more control and more choice in their lives. And especially in the tween and teen years, that's when they start to see themselves more and more independent of their families and to question some of the choices that we have set before them in their lives. It's a natural part of their development to gradually want more control and choice over their lives, and it is a normal part of their growth and maturation for them to rely less and less on our opinions and beliefs as they enter those tween and teen years. It's also wonderful to see them become curious and want to learn. We're trying to encourage them to learn in all aspects of their lives and to figure out who they want to become as adults. And so they need a little bit of space here to explore and to question. But the other thing I would say here, it's kind of counterintuitive, is that we as family not only love and nurture our kids, but we are exposing them to a family identity. This is who we are as a family, ethnically, spiritually, in other areas of our lives. This is who we are. So as they're bringing these questions to the fore, we're trying to kind of hold the space for them to be curious and explore, but also reassure them that this is where your roots are. This is where you come from.
You know, you've said so much, because what's interesting is that phase of teens and tweens is, you know, I think the term is differentiation, or I don't know exactly what the term is, but they're trying to solidify themselves in some way by ensuring that they're not like somebody else. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I agree. A lot of tweens and teens do help themselves stand out from others by differentiating their beliefs, their values, different things from that. Yes.
So what does that, you know, when they start doing the questioning, what's that questioning look like?
Well, there's two main areas that I think of in ways they can question. And really it comes down to this, Stephen. It's questioning and resisting in some cases in word, and resisting or questioning in action. Sometimes they express doubts about what we as a family practice and believe. Sometimes they express curiosity about the beliefs of a friend's family and their spiritual community. One of the main questions a lot of kids at this age will bring is why? Why do we believe this when the rest of the world seems to believe something else? Why do we take these particular actions or practices? And the second area I mentioned is resisting an action. It's not uncommon for tweens and teens to kind of resist or in some cases even refuse to get too involved in continuing the family's spiritual practices, or not want to attend services and participate in activities with your faith community.
Huh. So, you know, it's interesting because you have 3 kids. I have 2 kids, and I watch how my children learn. And as they learn, we have to learn because, you know, as parents, you know, we're trying to be a parent, but, you know, the kids, what they're capable of doing, how they handle things changes. But it's very interesting to see that that sort of how they resist almost doesn't change. You know, there's I don't want to do it and I'll tell you, and then there's the I'm just not doing it, you know, the words and action thing, and that stays consistent, and that stays consistent for parents in dealing with these types of issues.
Yeah, in some ways our children learn the word no when they're toddlers, and in some ways they come back around to a little bit more of that attitude in their tween and teen years. That's not true for every child. That's not true for every personality. This is just kind of a general stage of development. And something that I wanted to mention here, Stephen, that I feel is very worth our listeners pondering. I found a great article from the Huffington Post by the author David Briggs, and the title of the post is "The Number One Reason Teens Keep the Faith as Young Adults." So again, that's the number one reason teens keep the faith as young adults. And what he's doing is summarizing a study that was done by the University of Notre Dame, and it's one of the main findings from it, Stephen, is that the strongest factor associated with our older teens keeping their faith as young adults is having their parents who talk about their religion and spirituality at home. Mothers and fathers who practice what they preach and preach what they practice are far and away the major influence related to adolescents keeping the faith into their 20s. This is so related to our discussion today, because if we have some beliefs that we hope our children will embrace in some fashion moving forward, then we need to be walking the walk and talking the talk, as the saying goes.
Well, and what's also really powerful about this is, when we're thinking about the questions or when we're talking about the questions, it's how that tween or that teen is comparing themselves to somebody else. What's really fascinating for me is when you look at that age group, they are so dependent on their peers for everything, in the sense of, how they find their self-worth, what they care about, what they don't care about, and they will start caring for things they don't really like, but just because somebody else is doing it. And that then you're dealing with that either curiosity or that judgment from some other friend about what they do. And so, all those things are coming into play.
Absolutely. And it can get quite confusing and complicated for teens. And so and that also brings back the importance of keeping the lines of communication open between parent and child. It's good for teens to find out what other people are thinking, especially their friends, and to hear different points of view. But it's also good for teens and tweens to be able to go back to their parents and use them as kind of a wise sounding board, if you want to think of it that way, and say, I heard this, and I'd like to explore this with you. I'd like to discuss this with you. I'd like to bring you one of my why questions. I heard this, and why do you think he or she said that?
And I think that's really, really interesting, because that goes right back to the study that you were mentioning, is that parental engagement and, in some sense, transparency of, this is what we do and why, and this is how I feel I'm doing it, that becomes part of the, I don't know what you want to call it, counterbalance or the grounding that tween can go and refer back to, because I think that's, what you were mentioning in that study and why it was so attractive to you.
And one of the things that was really interesting about the study, one of the findings was that 82% of the children raised by parents who talk about faith at home attach great importance to their beliefs, and they're active in their communities as young adults. So that's a fantastic number right there.
Well, and you're I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the issues with tweens and teens related to their beliefs probably aren't that different from other issues related to them at that time. I could see this conversation about doubts and about curiosity going into alcohol, going into sexuality, all these other things that are major parts of life, either how they're going to live their life or a danger in their life, and how they could all, you sort of have a similar challenges that maybe are all coming out of parent at once or something like that. Have you seen that with the parents and the mothers and fathers you've been helping?
Absolutely. Excuse me. This is just a time when our youngsters, the tweens and the teens, are really, again, trying to figure out, who am I? Who am I becoming? Where do I stand individually? Where do I stand within my family? And so they're going to apply a lot of these questions and a lot of this curiosity across so many different complex areas of the world and areas of their lives, things that they probably hadn't thought about at 10 and 11 years of age. It just wasn't on their radar. Now it is.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to remind our listeners that you're listening to the Texas Conflict Coach blog talk radio program with your guest host, myself, Stephen Kotev. And as part of our Courageous Conversations series between parents and children of all ages, I'm joined by Janet Bonnin, and we are discussing talking to your tweens and teens when they question their beliefs. So what do you do, Janet? We've given some sort of overview of some of the underpinnings, or some of the causes of what could be bringing about these questions. So, but what do? You're a parent. How do you respond to a child who's questioning their beliefs?
So very, very good question, Stephen. And the first thing I would caution is I would put forth a don't for parents. Don't come on so strong if your child comes to you with questions and starts challenging some beliefs. Don't come on so strong that you shut them down when they ask these questions. If we shut them down by saying this is what our family believes and there's no room for discussion or something like that, then our kids are likely to resent us a bit, and in relation, they might resent the beliefs and then turn and look elsewhere to find answers. When that happens, we lose the ability to share what we believe and why we believe it. On the other hand, if we're open to really listening, we have the opportunity to address these questions and perhaps learn and grow a bit ourselves along the way. We have the ability to grow and change until we draw our last breath here on earth. In Christian and many other spiritual arenas, we believe that we are on a spiritual journey every day of our lives. Therefore, our sons and daughters can challenge us to get curious and seek answers and grow spiritually as we help them explore.
Huh. What really strikes me about that is, reframing. As opposed to getting defensive and, arguing or, sort of putting your parental foot down, or worse, when your child comes to you with a question, of you better not ever say that to me again, or whatever else, that will shut them off. That's what you're saying, and that you got to really do the opposite of that almost as much as you can to keep them invested.
And the beauty of it is, as they get curious, and they probably will come up with some questions that you once struggled with, and on the other hand, they may come up with some questions you had never thought of before, which can lead you into some very interesting explorations. And
so, what tips can you share for parents on how to address these questions?
Well, I have several. The first thing that I would like to encourage parents to do is remember to start and end any conversation around this with an attitude of love. Focus on the love that you feel for your son or daughter, and bring an attitude of openness to your conversation. If you're open to the idea, you might pray or meditate, or just start with a little bit of silence to collect your thoughts. And then bring empathy to this discussion. Empathize with some of the struggles your son or daughter might be facing. If they're curious enough to ask these questions, if you can tell they're really struggling with some of these issues, showing that empathy helps them understand you don't stand against them, but you're standing with them as they are exploring these issues. And again, we talked about being curious. Get curious with them. Address the questions to the best of your knowledge. If you aren't sure, by all means, turn to some trusted spiritual resources to seek answers. You might turn to your pastor, some recommended books that have stood the test of time, or your larger denomination's websites on things like theology and spiritual teachings.
That's, really, really interesting because, the whole idea of beginning and ending with love, that if you can figure that out, hopefully that's the antidote, if you get scared, if you get angry, that's going to be one of those things that's going to push your child away. But being able to go and taking care of yourself first, either praying or doing whatever you need to do to sort of bring some calm to yourself, that helps you then interact with your child in a very loving way that will keep them engaged.
And that is also, from a Christian perspective and from other spiritual perspectives, that's inviting, in the Christian perspective, that's inviting God into the conversation. And from other spiritual perspectives, it would be inviting a higher power to be part of that exploration and part of that conversation. Some of the other tips I was mentioning, Stephen would like to mention is to be willing to explain your why. Talk about why you feel or believe something to be true. And if you find that the conversation's getting difficult, find some common ground. Seek something that you can agree upon, even if it's just to agree that it was an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
It's also good to agree to pause the conversation if it's getting too emotionally tense and say, why don't we take a break and we can come back and look at this again together after we've calmed down a bit, or agree to come back and talk about this again on another day. Something that I would like to point out here, and it's something that I believe as a parent and a parent coach, if you feel strongly about your spiritual practices, you might state your expectations of what you do as a family. An example might be, in our family, we attend services on Sunday at 9 a.m. and we pray together daily. You're telling your son or daughter, this is something we do as our spiritual heritage, as our spiritual traditions. But then if they're curious about some individual explorations, you might offer them an additional invitation. It might look like this. Feel free to explore that concept as long as you join the family for our spiritual traditions, for our spiritual practices. So you're allowing your son or daughter to explore some individual exploration at the same time as holding the expectation, we're a family and these are some traditions and practices that we have in this family. So it ends up being both and, not either or.
Well, what's really striking about this is that sort of as a complement to love is transparency. Of you're saying for the parents, explain why something is the way it is, and then you're mapping out the expectations that go with it, but you're also not limiting, the child to go and engage further with something that they possibly want to explore.
Sometimes people's journeys most people's spiritual journeys are not a straight path from point A to point B. And so the exploration of questions and possibilities outside of whatever you consider your normal may actually help your tween or teen to feel stronger in their beliefs.
And that's so wonderful, as opposed to denying, your engagement goes and allows, them to feel solidified. But what this really gets me curious about is if you look how much things have changed, just the internet alone has changed so much of dynamics for people, and how much easier it is to travel and how much easier it is to make connections with people that you haven't had connections with in the past. And that's also coming into families where you've got mixed-faith households and parents who are coming from different traditions and they've got a child. Can you talk to us a bit about how you would respond to a mixed-faith household and where parents hold different faiths, and how to help deal with this issue and navigate some of the stuff, because it's got to be tough.
It is. It can be really challenging for parents of a mixed faith household to raise children and avoid some of the pitfalls that can come up if there's real big differences in their spiritual beliefs. We could spend an entire conversation just on this topic, as you could imagine, Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a theologian, but what I would like to share is 3 suggestions, just 3, because really that is material for people who do have deeper spiritual and theological backgrounds, in my opinion. But the first thing I'd share is, as soon as possible, I suggest to couples that they discuss and reflect, pray, decide with each other how they're going to live out their beliefs. Decide on which of the several options you might use or approach to raise your children. Some mixed faith households choose to teach your kids to practice only the mother's beliefs or the father's beliefs. In some cases, they practice both. So people of 2 different faith backgrounds might choose, for example, on the weekends, to attend services at both faith communities. This decision is not to be made lightly. Numerous studies have shown that our children are not likely to follow either of the parents' spiritual paths into adulthood if the parents choose to avoid participating in the faith communities and choose to avoid discussing why you believe what you believe. So the second thing, and that in itself, number 1, was very important, but the second suggestion is to avoid putting down your spouse or partner's beliefs. It can foster doubts and strife in the family, which in turn can cause your children to reject anything either of you say in the area of spirituality. And the third thing is to spend time with your spouse or partner exploring the common ground of your values and beliefs. There's common ground can be found in a lot of faith traditions. And getting clear on the common ground and then sharing the common ground of your values and beliefs regularly with your kids in word and action can help them have some sense of your family's spiritual identity.
And, I think that's really, really powerful, because you're, as parents, you fundamentally share a child as, an incredibly strong bond, and helping the children see the commonalities between those differences, I think is just really, really compelling. And, as we start to wrap the show up, what assignment for the week would you have for our listeners, to help them, if they want to engage with this further, what would be something that you would recommend for them?
I would love for the listeners to be open to discussing and exploring your family's spiritual beliefs with each other. Watch for ways through various documents that you can access online from trusted sources, through information that you hear when you go to your services, discussions that you hear when you go to your services. Expect to hear the question why as your kids enter their tween and teen years, and be open to exploring answers to those questions using the trusted spiritual people, books, and even electronic resources. And that's something that you can watch for not just this week, but on an ongoing basis. Because, again, let's reflect back on that study that shows that parents who are willing to talk about their spirituality and their beliefs in their home, and to not only talk about it but live it, those are the people who have the biggest influence on their children spiritually. Consider the possibility of doing some type of at-home faith study with your family, or a faith study through your church or other religious community. These are great ways to deepen your spirituality and to better understand why you believe what you believe. And remember, we can continue to grow in many ways, including spiritually, until the day we die. We as parents are our children's primary role models in word and action, so let's strive to be the best we can be in all areas.
So I feel like I should just put an amen on the end of that one. So how can folks find you, Janet? Because you just keep coming with this, wonderful insights. If people want to talk to you further, if people want to go and engage with you further, how can folks find you?
Well, first off, I'd be happy to speak with anybody who wants to reach out to me. One way to reach out to me is by email. My email address is janet@familiesoftheway.com, and I imagine there's a link on the Blog Talk Radio site for that. My website is familiesoftheway.com. There's a great tip sheet there. There's a couple of great tip sheets for free. One of them is on reducing stress for mom and dad. Another one is on setting good rules and expectations for the family and what the differences are between rules and expectations. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter and other places like that. But if folks want to, they can go to my Families of the Way Facebook page and give me a like, and then they'll stay connected with me that way.
So on Facebook, it's Families of the Way. Email is janet@FAMILIES oftheway.com. So those are the ways to find you. And what closing comments or thoughts do you have for us?
I just want to thank you, Stephen, for inviting me, and thank you, Patty, for inviting me to come on the show. And thank you to all who've listened and been part of this conversation.
Well, I want to thank you for your wisdom, your thoughtfulness, and your insight. I think now I understand why we've had you on 3 times, and thank you so much for your participation this time.
Thank you, Stephen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you enjoyed the program. You can find all of our podcasts archived to listen at your convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can also become a Facebook fan of Conflict Connection or Twitter me at TX Conflict Coach.